So I am introducing Into the Chasm. Into the Chasm, my third feature film. Talked about it briefly in the other introduction I did for my first two features, Psychotropic Overload and In Hoc and Staying There. In Hoc, kind of an advance over the techniques of psychotropic, doing different things, expanding upon, you know, uh, certain techniques and just filmmaking skill level. It's a little bit more interesting visually. Into the Chasm, yet another leap beyond the early films. Still a little static in places, part of the problem, clearly, the first couple films. Just being in them myself, sometimes shooting the scenes with myself and another person. Because I don't want to be reliant, on anyone. I feel in the mood to shoot it, let's do it. I'll set something up, and finding other ways to do cutaways and things like that. Somewhat problematic in those films, but finding a way around it that's still interesting. Chasm, I have a much smaller part, only a couple scenes of following the main character, and then I'm bringing in, for the first time, working with a real, John Meyer was in Hoc. He was a young actor from Chicago who was in that film, who I worked with. Ended up being pretty successful, in computers. I think pretty much left acting, but he was quite good. He was really talented. But in Chasm, I brought in, I was up and shot most of it in St. Paul, Minnesota. I brought in an actor from Los Angeles, actor, writer, director, John Crowther. His dad was a legendary New York Times film critic, Bosley Crowther. John had worked on Broadway with Harold Clurman. He was a working screenwriter. He'd written a couple of films for Bronson. He was living off the WGA pension. Directed theater, acted, and he was tremendous in the film. He plays a character named Mr. Christian, this mysterious PhD doing an experiment on creativity, but he's really brainwashing these kids. And it's a whole thing. Very intriguing film. A couple of those scenes that he's in where it has a very eyes wide shut. The three main influences for the film are Columbine, Eyes Wide Shut, some of the visual style and the lighting, some of those scenes, and just the vibe, and I guess a little bit of, there's a little bit of Seconds, the Frankenheimer film, Seconds, I guess another Frankenheimer's film, Manchurian Candidate, kind of that vibe, psychological thriller. Again, some issues. I think the performance enough, having Crowther, should have been enough to get into a couple of decent festivals. Again, didn't get in the Chicago Underground, didn't get into a number of them. They even hired I got swindled by one of these consultants, a guy named Bob Hawke, who, whatever, he gave me, I had to hire him to read a script and watch the film, and, he saw some value in both. There's some things he liked about it. He said maybe he cut it to a short, which I did years later. I cut Chasm into, you can see it in the background, shadow play. It's about 15, 16 minutes. And, a lot of the things with films like these is I'll really talk about it in the post. Stay around after you watch the film. I'll talk a little bit about the reception of it, but it's really films like this. It's the positioning many times, how a film's positioned, someone putting their stamp on it, getting into a festival, someone writes about it, or whatever. Someone has to give their approval. I think of a film around the same time, which was certainly better, but a film like George Washington. David Gordon Green's first film, there's some tremendous things in it. You're following the kid. Paul Schneider's a great actor, but there's nowhere near enough of him. And there are times where scenes are just like trying very much to do this Malick thing, and sometimes it works, and sometimes it's. You're sitting there for a long time. It's just, again, the positioning. You get into a couple of major festivals. Tim Moore is a great DP. I'm not. There's great things in it. But in an alternative universe, if that film doesn't get into a few festivals, and it's just like, it becomes that very nebulous. There's just a lot of vagaries to it, and it's not taking away from the film. I'm just saying, you go forward to something like The Puffy Chair. Love the Duplass brothers. They've done some great stuff, but again, there's another alternative universe where it's like, I don't know. They just, I'm not saying, the Chasm is on that level. What I'm saying is, but in that kind of no budget, low budget, 5-figure budget, that you shot initially on, I think Chasm, at least could have been into a couple of decent festivals, but it just wasn't in the cards, and it's unfortunate. But you can judge for yourself. I think the film's really intriguing. I think if you're a fan of kind of like Alan Pakula, that kind of thing, I think you'll dig it. There's a lot of interesting things in it. I'll come back and talk more about the reception or lack thereof after. Enjoy.